Kim. So I have the internet weather for this week, and I'd like to start with the top 10 most probe ports. So as you know, we like to measure the cyber threat activity on the internet, or just the ebbs and flows of what's going on. And one of the ways we do that is by looking at the port activity, the scanned ports specifically, that are being looked for. And this first chart here, it showcases the top 10 ports that people are interested on the internet and are scanning for. And everything in this chart, it's basically, unfortunately, it's normal. So there's a lot of interest in port 23 TCP, which is telnet associated with a lot of Mirai-like botnet activity usually, or 445, unfortunately associated with like WannaCry, and other ports that are very well known. So the port I want to cover today, which I just want to kind of take a peek at it, is port 8545 TCP. I had kind of forgotten what this was until I looked at it, even though it kind of appears in the top 10 pretty frequently. So let's look at that together. So this first chart here, it goes back 90 days, and it shows the amount of scanning activity on this port by anyone. You could see there's like millions of events per hour, every hour. But the activity is kind of up and down on some days. It's not really like predictable. So when it's like this, I kind of want to take a look at it a little bit deeper and see who's doing it, or how frequent is this, or how many people are engaged in it. And so when we do that, the chart kind of looks like this. You could see it's kind of an uninteresting chart, except maybe in a few spots here. But there's not that many IP addresses doing scanning for it, for this port.
So what are the spikes for?
These spikes, I actually took a look at them because I was interested just like you. And it turns out that these IP addresses are related to a well-known like a research company that does scanning on the internet to find out what's open or what's available. So these spikes are, you can see it very periodic. So it looks like maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks or something like that. This company goes and tries to figure out like what's going on the internet on this port. So all of these IP addresses are related to that scanning activity. So like I mentioned, I always forget what is port 8545 TCP. So I had to look this one up, and when I did, it actually turns out this is very well known. We've actually covered it on ThreatTraq before as well. But there's a product out there called it's an Ethereum wallet that you can get for your cryptocurrency. So it's Ethereum cryptocurrency wallet. And as a product, as part of having cryptocurrency, you need some software installed for your wallet to keep track of your cryptocurrency. And this particular software, it opens up port 8545, which is where it does like JSON RPC. And I guess somebody had a few years ago discovered that you can actually like attack this port and maybe transfer money or whatever. And so now they're obviously like scanning the internet looking for this. As you could tell before, there's a lot of scanning, but it all seems to be, it's just kind of happening all of the time. There's somebody always scanning for it. So if you have port 8545, or if you have an Ethereum wallet or something like that, just got to make sure, make doubly sure that you don't have, it's basically like a management interface almost, that you don't have this exposed, and so nobody can get to it. Check your firewall settings and things like that. In general, if you're at home and you have your laptop, probably want to make sure you have a router in front of your modem, like a Wi-Fi hotspot, because that'll actually protect you from this type of scanning most of the time, unless you did something special. So moving on, the next part of the internet weather is the top 10 most sources probing report. So this is the same thing. We're still looking for scanning activity by ports, but this time we're trying to consider what are the ports where there's a lot of IP addresses doing the scanning. So this week, It's all the same ports as before. These represent generally either botnets or ports of high interest where a lot of people are interested in them all at once. I wanted to take a look at port 1433. I think it's associated with MS SQL. Now, there's a lot of, over the years, a lot of vulnerabilities with that port, but since it's in the top 10 and we kind of understand what it is, we never really look at it. But I want to check it out a little bit more, and I want to see if there's anything interesting about it. Now, because this port is so well known, you could see that I look back 5 years to see what the scanning activity will look like on this port over 5 years. And these are the number of IP addresses doing the scanning. So you could see back in the day, I don't know, like 5 years ago is not really back in the day, but 5 years ago, you could see there were only, let's say less than 1,000 computers per hour scanning on this port. But more recently, you could see there's, almost 20,000 IP addresses at a time in some hours doing scanning and looking for something on this port. Now, there's a lot of things you could look for. You could look for brute forcing. You can maybe try to guess the password, or you could look for, like a vulnerability that exists. So I have to assume that that's what is being sought after here. Looking at it a little bit closer, just to look at the 90-day activity, just to see what has recently changed, rather than looking back 5 years and seeing kind of like this big picture. You can see things are actually like, I guess this is called ho-hum. Things are going along as usual. There's not much variation in the number of IP addresses engaged in this. There's anywhere between, 9,000 to 15,000 IP addresses at a time doing scanning. So it's very well-known, steady kind of threat. It should remind you, if you have this port or this service or a server that has something to do with SQL, you should just think about how it's deployed. Make sure your firewall policies are secure. If you're putting anything in the cloud, just ensure and understand that you have that firewall policy locked down. I know that a lot of cloud providers now, they'll make it a little bit harder for you to make a mistake, but it won't be impossible. So you should really just double check any firewall rules. If you're setting up a deployment of a server in the cloud, just make sure that you understand like how it works and what all the terms on the page mean. I noticed that there's a lot of, it's become really easy to get a server up and running, but because of that, if you're not familiar with it, with some of the terms even, you can make some mistakes. I decided, this is something I usually do, and I don't know what image this evokes in your mind, but for me, I wanted to check out, like, where are these IP addresses that are scanning coming from? Who's doing the scanning and where they're coming from? And it took the last 4 hours of activity, I think, and it was about, just a little over 13,000 IP addresses scanning all at the same time.
To your point, Stan, when people set up their networks and what you allow in via your firewall, you make sure your firewall is doing some type of inspection or have, so you have the MySQL 1433 port open. You want to make sure that, you don't get any SQL injection to look, to inspect those packets and so forth. Also, if you don't have to, if companies don't have to allow certain ports open via the internet, then they shouldn't. If it's, if you can keep it internal, keep as much traffic internal as you can now that you can, connect to certain clouds via private connections instead of over the internet. At first, everything was over the internet, but now you can connect privately within your networks and on their backbones and don't have to go over the internet.
Yes. When I look at this chart, it reminds me of a couple of things. First of all, I think it's saying, hello, this is the internet, and I want to know if you have port 1433 open, because it's pretty much everyone is interested in this port all over the world, and there's certainly a lot of hotspots as well. And the second thing, it actually reminds me of the Kubernetes story that you mentioned. 1433 is like an administrative interface, and we always tell everyone, like, make sure you lock down your administrative interfaces out there and things like that. And it reminded me very similar, and slightly different, because you're not dealing with firewalls necessarily with Kubernetes. Kubernetes is like an administrative interface as well. and people should lock that down. So I think it's like a repeated theme for us on the show in general is definitely for any special purpose port, for any special like administrative interface, whatever it is, port 8545 for your Ethereum wallet, or your Kubernetes cluster management server, or your SQL administrative port. Make sure you lock it down. Don't let things, ensure your firewall policy is sound and secure, and you really understand how things are deployed. Because if you don't, this chart should help you see that there are a lot of people looking to get into your environment. And some of the, like even that ransomware attack, we don't know how it started, but it could have started as simply as something like this. So I guess that's the internet weather for today. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And if any of our viewers, if you guys have suggestions for what you'd like to see explored, or if you have any questions or feedback or comments, or if you understand this activity a little bit more, we'd love to hear from you, and feel free to post in the comment section below. Thank you.